My name is Christina Brenda, and this is my service quilt. I decided to use Service Jeopardy to explain my 9 service words. My service philosophy is always have a positive attitude, be courteous to all guests, make sure your service goes above and beyond expectations, listen to their needs, and be understanding and helpful. My not-so-service philosophy is don't be negative toward the guest. Try not to do the minimum. You can always do something more. Don't be stuck in your ways because there's always a way to improve. Now let's talk about Service Jeopardy. So I've got 9 categories here. Positive attitude / courtesy, going above and beyond, training, doing it better than that, teamwork, listening, show, safety, and being personable with our guest. So let's look at our first category, positive attitude and courtesy. So for positive attitude and courtesy for 100, I have something you should always do that makes you look approachable. The answer is, what is smile? Always projects a positive image. Positive attitude / courtesy for 200. This is also known as saying hello or asking how a guest is doing. What is greeting? You always want to greet each and every guest. After that, for 300, we have this is understanding guests' wishes and responding to them accordingly. We have what is respect. For 400, we have this is what you do when a guest is expressing a concern. What is listen? You always want to listen to what your guest has to say, because most of the time that's all they want is for you to listen to them. And for 500, this is how you should end almost every guest interaction. So you should always, what is thank? You should always end by thanking your guest. Moving on to our next category, going above and beyond. For 100, this is what you do when talking to guests. What is get to know your guests? To explain that a little bit more, for 200, this is what you should learn about guests to get to know them better. What is learn names, where they're from, and other things like that. So you always want to ask them their name, try to put a name to a face, and ask them where they're from to make it feel a little more personable. Going into 300, if a guest asks where something is, if possible, this is what you should do. What is show, don't tell? It's better to walk a guest to the location they're asking about than to tell them how to get there, because then it can get a little confusing. Moving on to 400, this is when you try to make an experience extraordinary by doing something special. What is a magical moment? It's just making a little bit more of a memory for our guests. And then last, for 500, this is how your work area should be to make the guest experience seamless. What is organized? You always want to make sure you have an organized workspace. It benefits not only you, but it also benefits your guest. Now we're going to move on to our next category, which is training. For 100 in training, this is who a new employee should shadow while learning the ropes. What is an expert at the role? Somebody who's been doing the role for a while and can answer any questions that our new employee might have. Moving on to training for 200, a manager should always give these to keep employees clued in on new training. What are updates? Whenever the business changes, because the business always grows and changes, the manager should always give updates so that their employees can grow as well. Moving on to training for 300, a company should have these set so that new employees can become proficient in the area. What are training programs? We always want to make sure that there are training programs for our new hires so that there's a set system that they can go through. And then for 400, I already opened it, this person should ensure training goes smoothly and meet with new hires to ensure they understand their position. Who is the manager? Manager should always oversee the training in the long run to make sure that the new hire feels comfortable performing their new position. And last but not least, training for 500, work areas should have these as designated people who have a thorough understanding of their role and can be a good example of going above and beyond. Who are trainers? Alright, moving on to our next category, doing it better than that. So doing it better than that for 100. This is the second category of the service Jeopardy. It reminds us we can always give the guests a little extra magic. What is going above and beyond? It's very important. Now moving on to 200. This is something you can do at home. You always want to keep this neat and not distracting to the guests. Make sure you reflect a positive image. What is your appearance? Now doing it better than that for 300. Something else you should keep presentable and clean. What is your workspace? Like your appearance, it reflects your work location, and you always want to make sure you're reflecting it in a positive way. Now, doing it better than that for 400. If you keep a smile on and show you are having this, so will your guest. What is fun? If you're having fun, so will your guest. And last but not least, for 500, doing it better than that, an answer you should never give to your guest. What is no or I don't know? Always find the answer. Don't say no or I don't know. If you don't know the answer, then say that you'll find out for them. Then we're going to move on to our next category, teamwork. So teamwork for 100, this word completes the quote. Teamwork makes the... What is dream work? Of course, a quote all of us have heard, teamwork makes the dream work. Our teammates can really help us do some awesome things. Moving on to 200, by using teamwork to lift or push heavy items, you are practicing this. What is safety? For 300, we have by completing tasks with a coworker, things can get finished faster. This is also known as, what is efficiency? It's always good to be efficient in your role. For 400, when working together, the task may seem less tedious, and once again, we have this for 400 last category, what is fun? There's not a problem with trying to have a good time while you're working, as long as your job gets done. And then for 500, when working together and putting your thoughts together, you may come up with more and better of these. For 500, we have what are ideas? So there's always a better way to do something, and when you work together, you might be able to find that when you put your heads together and use your teamwork. Now moving on to our next category, listen. For 100, if a guest is complaining, you should not do this. What is argue? You should never argue with your guest. Always listen to what they have to say and try to come up with a solution. For 200, when a guest is complaining, you should try to do this and come up with a solution. What is understand? You need to understand what they're telling you. For 300, if a guest is complaining, you want to try to make them happy and fix their problem by doing this. What is anticipate the guest's needs? So they tell you what's wrong, and you need to anticipate what they need to make that right. For 400, this word fits the blank. The guest is blank right, even when they aren't. For 400, the guest is always right. 500, keep in mind, an upset guest just wants someone to do this. This is the same as our category title, what is listen? An upset guest just wants us to listen to them. Alright, we're going to move on to our next category. We have show. Show for 100. This is how your appearance should be when you go into work. What is neat? So you should always have a neat appearance, something that's not distracting to our guests. Now for 200, this is how your workspace should always look. What is clean or show ready? Disney often uses the term show ready. It should just basically be neat and ready for any guest to walk by. Now moving on to 300, Disney uses this to make it feel like you are truly someplace else. What is theming? Whether it's in the way we talk or if it's in our workspace itself, Disney uses theming, and it really helps put on this show for our guests. If you're at the Polynesian resort, you're going to hear them say aloha. If you're in Animal Kingdom, you might hear them say jumbo. So they do a really great job of keeping up with our theming. Moving on to show for 400. This is something you should not use when interacting with a guest. What is a cell phone? It's not good to be on a cell phone when you're talking to a guest. Now moving on to show for 500. So show for 500. This is something you should not do in guest areas as it can be distracting from the overall show of things. What is eat or chew gum? Alright, just 2 categories left. We're going to move on to safety. Safety for 100. Safety, courtesy, show, and efficiency are known as these 2 Disney cast members. What are the 4 key basics? Disney does a great job of making sure our cast members know what these are, and safety is the most important of the 4 keys. Moving on to 200, in order for a guest to be safe, it has to begin with these people. Who are employees? If our employees aren't safe, our guests aren't going to be safe. For 300, we have safety is not able to be compromised. It is a blank. What is a top priority? So safety always comes first. We don't want it to be compromised in any situation. It is our most important thing. Moving on to safety for 400, the employees must report things that are considered blank, which is anything that may put guests or employees in harm's way. What is a safety concern or a near miss? So a near miss is something that could become dangerous to someone. Maybe there's a sharp edge on something. Definitely want to get that reported so nobody does get hurt by it, a near miss. So safety for 500. It is important to make sure you are being safe both on stage areas and also blank areas. What are backstage areas? You want to make sure you're being safe both on and off stage, because like we said earlier, safety begins with the employees. Now last but not least, we want to make sure that we are personable with our guests. So being personable for 100, this is the first thing you should learn when interacting with a guest. What is the guest's name? So first thing you should learn is their name. Moving on to 200, this is one of the next things you should learn. Maybe not quite necessarily the second thing that you're going to learn about them, but this should come shortly after their name. For 200, what is where they are from? So 2 important things, their name, where they're from, make them feel unique and special. Then moving on to 300, you should always show the guest this and get to know theirs. What is personality? You want them to know your personality and get to know theirs a little bit better as well. Moving on to 400, this is something you should find out about your guest. It is something they come to you with and you should always try to top. What are expectations? They always have an expectation when they go someplace, whether it's a high expectation or a low expectation. No matter what, we want to make sure that we can top that expectation. And moving on, last but not least, for 500, greet guests with this and ask how they are doing. What is a smile? Always keep a smile on your face, as we've mentioned before. So that is Service Jeopardy, and that is my service quilt. Thank you everyone for listening.